Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, Trader Steve here at Logic FX Trading, and welcome to another lesson in our Competent Trader series. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about identification. Up to now, we've had in our building block series, we went through using these little tools to identify the templates, as it were, of the different Elliott wave structures, and that's fine. We need to know those inside out, but we also need to be able to identify each of those structures on a live chart. And once we've identified them, then we can try and interpret what's going on in the chart at the point that actually matters, which is over here. What's going to happen next? Before we can say what's going to happen next, we have to interpret what's going on, and before we do that, we've got to identify what each of these waves are, and then we can make our progress forward. Now, with identification, it's very difficult to talk about identification without talking about interpretation and extrapolation, which is forecasting what's going to happen next. But we'll try to just stick to pure identification here. And what I'm going to do here is we've got the euro dollar index on a 4-day time scale. Each candle's 4 days, and I've taken it to that level so we can get a big chunk off it. Do you remember we did step 1 analysis before? So this isn't exactly step 1 analysis. The point here is trying to identify what's going on, which is also step 1 analysis, part of step 1 analysis, should I say. So the other thing I want to point out is that on this high time scale, you can identify structures that you'll see over and over and over again on the lower time scale, and that's the beauty of Elliott wave theory, because it's based on the fact that you'll see those structures over and over again. The only difference in them is, or the only thing that we don't know, is amplitude and time. So we don't know when we're getting a certain wave. We don't know how far up or down it's going to go, and we don't know how long it's going to take to produce or to complete the whole movement. But what we do know is that if we've had a certain structure, there's a very high probability, and remember we work on probabilities, there's a very high probability that the next move will be something that's predictable using Elliott wave theory. And that's a very important and very useful tool to have when you're trying to trade. So let's now have a look at this and try and identify on this large scale some of the things that Elliott talked about. And we can also see areas, even on this high scale, where we get repeat of something, but the amplitude and the time scale of it is on a different level. So let's go ahead and start. We'll start down here at the bottom, and we'll just put a line in there, and we'll say, okay, from there, what have we got? Well, that's an impulse, that's a correction. Okay, so we can see that over 20, 16, 17 years, whatever it might be. Well, that's fantastic. So there's a starting point. So let's start by trying to interpret this. If we've said that's an impulse, it looks like an impulse, so we start with that premise. It's an impulse. And then we say, well, where's the bottom and where's the top? Now, in interpretation, we will try and work through structures that aren't complete. That's the next level. At the moment, we're just trying to identify the structures, learn how they're made up and how they look on a live chart, and then we'll take it to the next step later, where we're saying, right, we've got that, what are we going to get next? That's the skill that we need to develop. But before we can do that, we need to be able to identify what's happened up to now. Okay, so if that's the start and that's the finish, and we can see it's the finish because it's done and it's moved away, so that's an impulse between there and there. So what else do we have in it? Well, we know an impulse needs to have 5 waves. So if we start from the last wave rather than the first wave, we can say, well, that's one complete wave. You can see it is. So that's a 5. That's a complete wave, the wave that came before the 5. So there's a 4. That means from there to there we have a 1, 2 and a 3. So obviously our first wave is a 1, which means we're looking for a 2 and a 3. Now, there's a little thing here, and the reason I picked this particular chart to analyze is that there's a little thing here that doesn't look like anything we've seen in Elliott, and therefore it may or may not be something. So we have to work hard at working out what it is, because we've this A, B, C. Oops, sorry, that's the wrong. Let's just take that out. I'm not going to edit this, guys, because it takes too long to edit. So we'll just go, that's an A, B, C. That's what it looks like. But that certainly doesn't look like anything we see in Elliott, because in Elliott we get a flat correction. We get an expanding correction. We get a flat corrections. These are, we get a running flat correction. And we also get zigzags. Which look like that, with C below the bottom of A. That C isn't below the bottom of A, so that's problematic. So, let's just clear this all out. So we've had our 1. We've had our 5. And there's a 3 in there somewhere, with that being a 4, and we don't know where the 2 is. So what we got to do then is we got to say, well, if this is a 3, let's work backwards yet again. So that's a 5. That's a 4. So in there we've got a 1, 2 and a 3. That's a 4, then is that a 2? A 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Quite possibly, which means that's a 1, that's a 2. That's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a 4 and a 5, a 4 and a 5, a 1 and a 2. The only issue I have with that is, and let's do that like this. I'm saying that's a 1, that's a 2, that's a 3. Oops. Let's clear it up again. Let's get the correct thing. There we go. So we're saying that's a 1 and that's a 2. That's a 3 to there, that's a 4 to there, and that's a 5 to there. Now, there's a thing in Elliott called the right look, and that for me doesn't have the right look. To there it has the right look, because that has to be of the same order of magnitude as the second wave, and if it's only to there, that kind of doesn't. That's the same order of magnitude as that or that, but that is the same order of magnitude as that. So this is a little bit of a problem down here, but let's go ahead and put the rest of our we'll change the color. To green. Four, 5, 4. So I pulled the wrong one down there. Yeah, that's okay. So with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that looks okay. From there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But now we've got to make sure we have a 5 in there. So let's zoom in a little bit. So that third wave needs to have 5 in it as well. So we're going to say that's a 5. We'll take it from the, we'll change the color again to purple. And, oops. Purple. So it's possibly a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Although I don't like that bit. Let's zoom in again. Remember, this is on a 4-day chart, and we've missed a big one out there. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a 1. That's a 2. That's a 3. That's a 4. And that's a 5. The only issue with that is that third wave looks like it isn't. Sorry, it looks like it's the shortest. Definitely shorter than the 5th. Possibly it's equal with the third, so we might get away with that. So, what have we got? One, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're back down to this. And that's a 1, an A, B, C, possibly. But the reason I picked this one was that Elliott wave isn't paint by numbers. It works 90% of the time, but we have to interpret things. As this was developing, we would have had a 1, 2. And then we would have had a 1, 2. So let's look at that. Is that the issue? So let's clear ourselves up here. And we'll do it from the bottom up. So we have a 1, 2, and then a third wave that comes up there, 4 and a 5 going on up there. So then, so where's our third wave end? Well, that's our fourth wave. There, that's our fourth wave. And then our fifth wave goes up there. So, take this, change the color, and we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That looks good. Take another one, change the color. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That looks good. So, the only thing that stops that being the 2 is the fact that that's the 4. It's much bigger. But I'm happier with that than our initial interpretation of it. And you do get structures like this. We'll see it again over here. There's the same structure there. This structure here, A, B, C, we'll see in here, A, B, C. If we zoom in on that, we'll see the same structure. That is a flat correction. That is a flat correction. Okay, so what we've identified so far is that we've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 impulse up. We've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the third wave. And we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 within the third wave. So the third wave has an extension within it. So that's an impulsive wave. So we've worked it out to there. That's our impulse. It all ties up. It all works out. That's the top of our 5. What is this? It was important to go back to there, because if we just started there, we wouldn't know what that was. By knowing what this is, we can then work out what the next bit is. Because Elliott tells us that when we get an impulse of whatever shape or form, let's just neaten it up a little bit. Once we do that, we then have a correction of that, which should be an A, B, C of some form or other. Remember that there are many forms of corrective waves, but for the sake of this exercise, we'll just do a flat. And what we do know is that the correction should come into the area of the fourth wave at least. And there's our fourth wave. Our A, B, C has come down into the fourth wave. B's come back, because we're saying this is a flat, B's come back up into the area of the top to give us a double top. And then C, in theory, should just break, it should at least break the bottom of A. Okay, so where are we with this? If that's what we're looking at. This is quite complex. So let's see what we can work out. Now, clearly that's the top. So that's an A and a B. And then we should get a C. But this is a huge C. But it needs to be a huge C. And we often get a C that looks like that. And C's are 5 waves. In other words, they're impulsive. And that's one of the reasons that they can come so deep. They can just come to there, or they can push on down. Now, why is this pushed so far? Well, we already talked about it. There's our fourth wave. That pushed down so far because the fifth wave was so long. That is a long fifth wave, and it's an extended fifth wave. So that came down to there, into the area of the fourth wave, which is part of our rules. So then what do we get? Well, that's an ABC. That correction is complete. And when we get a complex correction, we'll go over here and we'll look at complex corrections. When we get a complex correction, we get, let's say, a zigzag, for example. And then we get a 3 of some form or other. And then we get whatever comes after it, let's say a flat. So we got to remember that. And then whenever we join these up, we use our WXY. So there's our first wave, there's our X, our connector, and there's our third wave. Let me just move that so you can see that. That's an X. So that's our W, that's our first correction of our complex correction. That's our 3, which we always call an X. That's a Y, which is the end of our second. And if we go on to get a third bit, then obviously it becomes Z. With an X in between, we'll get another 3, and then we'll get our next 3-wave correction. Okay, so that's how complex corrections look. That's what we've got to compare this to, because this is, because it's on a 4-day, it's clearly a complex correction. So if we've had, let's take this one, we can use this down here. So we've had an A, B, C, so that's a W. We need an X, and our X is a 1, 2, 3. Quite possibly an A, B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and ABC. So that's our X. And then this is the start of our next part of our complex correction. And if we do this, things start to look very familiar. We have a flat correction, which is an A, B, C. So up to there, we've had and that it finishes our Y to there. So we have a complex correction, all of which occurs, or doesn't break, should I say, the bottom of 4. So that's all a correction. And what happens after that? Well, then we get this move here, which looks impulsive. It's almost a diagonal, but not quite. So how do we analyze this then? Well, what we can do with this is we can take we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is a truncated wave down. It probably breaks the bottom. Let's have a look at it. It does. When you get in closer, you can see that it actually breaks the bottom. And then this is a complex correction, which we'll just call an A, B, C. That's our 5th wave coming down. That's our 3rd wave. That's a 2nd wave, and we'll see that structure over and over again. In fact, we can see it there, only in the opposite direction. If we zoom into this, I don't know if we'll be able to do it or not. When we're on the lower time scale in this, it looks very, very similar to that structure there, where we have a zigzag, we have a 3, and then we have another zigzag coming up for an ABC or a WXY. And often these corrections, when we get to that point, we think they're going short, we trade them down, and then they come back up. Now, this is a 4-day chart, so obviously we could have traded that very easily. But if this was on a 1-hour chart or a 4-hour chart, that could get us into trouble. And that's why when we trade, we get our stop to zero as quickly as possible, so if it does come back up, we don't lose any money. And if it goes, then we're into something like that. But we can never tell when these things are over until they're over. We just interpret each day what's happening and make our trading choices based on what we've got. And when it runs like that, you don't have too much to think about. It's just short, 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 short. For how long? A year. Near enough a year. From, say, May 2014 to February, March 2015. 9, 10, 11 months there of just going down. That was easy and beautiful to trade. A lot of money to be made there. Okay, so what we've done is we've identified all of these structures. We've got our impulse up, we've got our correction, we've got another impulse coming down, which is correcting this whole move up. And if we put a fib on it, which isn't really part of identification, it's more for interpretation, it's come down to the 78.6. And what's our last bit? So that's a 5 from there down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then, and remember, a C wave is a 5 wave, which is the reason why we can call that a 1. Because that's a 5, so a 1 will also have a 5. So that's a 5, that's a 3, that's a 5. You don't even need to count that. You can see that's an impulsive wave. It's not the shortest, therefore it's a C. It's in the right location for a C. That's an ABC 3-wave, 4th wave, 3-wave corrective 4th wave, and our 5th wave is truncated. It's broken the bottom, so it's a 5th wave. And then we get this move up, which also lasted a year. It's impulsive. It's a 1. We've got that same shape there, you can see it. 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we're getting a correction. That little structure there, oops, is very similar to that little structure there, where you don't know, is that an ABC, or is it a 1, 2, and then a 1, 2 of the next move up? You can call it both if you want. It only matters when you're trying to work out where you are at the top here. But remember, there's lots of other things we can do to work out where we are. And one of those, and let's just do that while we're here. One of those is to bring in an index. So we bring in DXY, which is the dollar index, into this. And when we're trying to work out where we are, this can help us interpret where we are. Now let's clean this thing all up, and then we'll get a better idea of what we're looking at there. Clean the whole thing up. And there you can see that they look similar, but the amplitude is often different. That came down. This is almost a mirror image when the euro dollar goes up, the dollar comes down, and when the dollar comes down, the euro dollar goes up, because that's showing weakness in the dollar, so you get strength in the euro dollar. And when we look at this, we can see that's a big flat correction. So that gives us our flat correction there. And then that part that we call the C initially, of part of our flat correction, well, we can see here that it's clearly a 1, 2, 3. So then we can say, yes, that's a 1, 2, 3. So when it's not obvious what's happening there, if we bring in an index, and it's clearer on the index what we're dealing with, then we can put it back in and say, well, that's a 1, because that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that one didn't push down as much as that one pushed up. But nonetheless, it's the same thing. It's the same wave. So then bringing these in, bringing the indexes in, and the correlation between the index and the euro-dollar pair can help us with our identification of waves. And then the next step would be interpretation. So what we'll do, we'll make a series of videos now, after this, on a lower time scale, looking at this thing over and over again, identifying different structures, leading diagonals, ending diagonals, extensions, flats, zigzags, complex corrections. We've had a look at it on a larger time scale, and now we'll go into it on a lower time scale, so we practice it over and over and over again, so that it becomes a second nature to be able to look at it and say that's what it is. Okay, I hope this is helpful. It's just the introduction to identification. Okay, bye for now. See you in the next lesson.